I was always a shy kid, and to me, the transition from high school to college was kind of scary. All of these new people, all of these new ideas, it was overwhelming at first. But over time, I began to find my footing, and I found that there was one particular thing that shaped the man I would become. In my first semester of college, I took a class that rocked my perception of morality. I wasn't an innocent pupil like I had been my whole life. I was now cursed with the death of my own arrogance and by knowledge given to me by my instructor. I was confronted first with the fact that I was never an innocent pupil, and then with the fact that there were no answers to any of my questions. Our professor had this assignment at the end of the semester. During this assignment, we had to bring forth an ethical issue and present it to our class, and then take a stance on it. Just like everyone else in the class, I tried to put together an 8-minute PowerPoint slideshow that introduced an ethical issue that I was very passionate about. I was 18 when I made this presentation, and it took me about a week to make. I rehearsed this presentation every day, sometimes for hours at a time. I gave this presentation on November 20th, 2023. The following 8 minutes consist of the very same presentation that I gave my Intro to Ethics for Health Professions class my freshman year. If there's one thing this class has taught me, it's the melancholy fact that if you try to solve an ethical issue in terms of black and white, you're going to almost always be disappointed. Every time I read a scenario in this book that raised moral dilemmas in the medical field, I wanted nothing more than to figure it out, and to figure it out in a way that gave me an answer that satisfied me completely. An answer that would make Kantians and relativists shake hands, or one that would have utilitarians and deontologists agree. An answer with no holes, no implications, and no moral side effects. But an answer like that is almost guaranteed to be a fairy tale. Now, this doesn't mean the answer isn't out there somewhere, waiting for someone to think of it and turn that idea into an action. But until that happens, all we can do is our best and make ethical arguments to the best of our moral ability, and accept that there will always be a little bit of bad, something that is very hard to do in talking about topics that evoke emotion, such as this one. Before I introduce my topic, I'm going to briefly review a few concepts first. We've all taken bio, or at least most of us have, so I'm going to save you the lecture on DNA and the human genome for another day. However, I will briefly describe it for the context of this presentation, just to refresh your memory. Each of us has a unique code inside of us. This code determines how tall we are going to be, the color of our eyes, the color of our skin, our taste, our sensitivity to things, our hair. To an extent, this code even determines how long we are going to live. Now, I'm guessing many of you have already figured out where I'm going with this, so I'll just get to the point. On November 26, 2018, Chinese biophysicist He Yongkoi announced that he had successfully altered the genome of 2 human embryos using the CRISPR gene. Less than a year later, Lulu and Nana were born, twin girls with an alleged resistance to HIV due to alterations made by Yongkoi. This code that determines everything about us was proven to carry the potential to be altered, and in doing so, raises what may very well be the most debated ethical question in the coming century. Is it morally permissible to alter the human genome? Now, even though the negative implications are clear, I still must pay my respects to the brilliance and positive potential for such a tool. We live in a world plagued by negative mutations in our code, inherited genetic disorders such as cystic fibrosis, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, Huntington's disease, and even some types of cancer. With enough leaps of progress in this incredible new technology, some, if not all, of these disorders would be cured. Finding out your baby has a crippling sickness that is caused by a genetic disorder would be yesterday, but now we can live in a world free of genetic disorders, and now the negative implications are getting much louder. Now I want you all to think of some of the words that I just said. A world free of genetic disorders, cured, negative mutations. Defining these descriptions is an incredibly difficult task, and now those clear negative implications have become too loud to ignore. The greatest frustration with this class is that when you take a stand on a moral issue, it forces you to draw a line. You must surrender some of your morality to the opposing side to make a valid argument on yours, regardless of what the implications may be. and this is why I have such a hard time speaking objectively about this topic. Any alteration of the genetic code to make your offspring more biologically favorable requires you to draw a line to justify the morality of your decision. Where do you draw the line between gene therapy and gene enhancement, and what lies just to the right or just to the left of that line that you just drew? The possibility of the existence of genetic enhancement is an almost guaranteed outcome. Eventually, our species will most likely develop the technologies to genetically enhance our unborn to unforeseen amounts. But the problem is, who will be able to afford these alterations? Right now, we are growing up in a society that is statistically structured like so. To put it as bluntly as possible, the rich tend to stay rich, and the poor tend to stay poor. However, the gap between the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor would be made much, much greater with the existence of genetic enhancement. Now, if you're rich, for the low price of $9 million, you can add 30 IQ points to your offspring's genetic code. Now the gap between the rich and the poor just gets larger and larger and larger, as the rich continue to have genetically predisposed geniuses as children, while the offsprings of the average Americans remains just that, average. If the American dream wasn't already dead, or if it even existed in the first place, this would be the end of it for sure. In this dystopian future in which genes are commodified, now corporations and companies alike may hire specific candidates because of their specific genes. In a future where gene alteration, therapy, and enhancement become legitimate factors, you may get a job at one company because you have a gene linked with one trait, but then get rejected from the next because of the same trait you possess. And let's also think about what we are telling people that are around that area of just to the left or just to the right. We are literally taking groups of people with a certain trait out of the gene pool, and that sends a message no one wants to be on the receiving end of. You are an imperfection, a human life that is flawed to the point to where it would be better if people like you didn't exist. I believe the idea of genetic enhancement, especially that of the CRISPR gene, is fascinating, and in some ways it's quite beautiful. But in my subjective opinion, it is impermissible to change the human genome in ways that benefit the offspring to heights that are not biologically natural. But now there are negative implications of this moral argument. What does biologically natural mean? Biologically natural is just another way to say the word that I have been trying to avoid using ever since we had a section of this class trying to define it. Normal. Normal can mean a person in good general health, but normal also has the ability to get extremely specific. And when it does, what is everyone outside that realm of specificity? Until an answer to this question is found, all I can do is my best, and make ethical arguments to the best of my moral ability, and accept that there will always be that little bit of bad, even when it causes such great moral distress inside of me. Though there are implications that I cannot yet explain, I still believe that genetic enhancement of the human genome to an extent that is biologically unnatural is impermissible. My time is nearing an end, and I don't know if me saying that brings joy to your ears or if it brings tears to your eyes, but regardless, I thank all of you for being very good listeners. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and thank you for your time. This was the presentation that I gave Monday, November 20th, 2023, to my Introduction to Ethics for Health Professions class.